Thank you. Could I have that, the evaluation framework marked as the next exhibit, please?
Exhibit number 1227.
And Mr. Lunn, you can take down the evaluation framework, and if you could please bring up HealthSIC document number 59, the one entitled Draft FSC Access Guiding Principles. Mr. Huber, this document you've seen already, the Draft FSC Access Guiding Principles. My understanding is this, or a version of it like it, is item 5 in the FSC Access Strategy components. Are you aware of that?
Microphone, please.
Okay, sorry, into the microphone, please.
Yes, I would be aware of that.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Lunn, if we could advance to page 5, please. Page 5 is Draft Principle 3. Now, Draft Principle 3 reads, processes and decisions regarding FSC access, amount, fishing area, and fishing opportunity should incorporate some flexibility with a general consistent approach. And if we then drop down to potential discussion issues, you'll see point 1, balance between flexibility and consistency, agreement on guiding principles would be a big step towards consistency and transparency. DFO has no intention of trying to develop a one-size-fits formula. So this is consistent with the document you've just seen, which is the evaluation framework, those principles of consistency yet flexibility, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then we're into number 3, please, transparency. First Nations have expressed concerns around lack of transparency in decision-making re FSC access. DFO is accountable for its decisions, and they should reflect agreed-upon guiding principles. I'll stop there. So that phrase, agreed-upon guiding principles, you'll agree with me that the agreed-upon guiding principles means agreed upon between DFO and First Nations, correct?
I'm not sure. That was an internal development document. It should be.
I'm sorry, could you speak into the microphone?
The other day I was breaking people's eardrums, so sorry about that. I should read that again then. The principles in that this was an internal document. I would say I'm not clear on that statement.
So you're not cleared on when they say agreed upon guiding principles, who are the parties are supposed to agree upon it? It seems to me it's self-evident it's government and First Nations, or DFO and First Nations. It definitely should be, and I mean that's the work I'm doing now. I expect that will be part of it for sure. That, where we collaborate and develop things jointly. Okay. Mr. Lunn, we can take down the PowerPoint on the left, but leave the Draft Principle 3 up. And if you can then pull up on side by side, HealthSIC document number 43, entitled Management Principles for FSC Fisheries. Now, Mr. Huber, during the break, I had arranged for you to review Management Principles for FSC Fisheries, that document on the left, those 9 principles. And what I'm going to ask you is, are you aware this document, Management Principle for FSC Fisheries, my understanding is that this is the final or close to final version of those draft principles on the right. Is that correct?
This was years ago and I haven't looked at it for years, but it would be. I mean,
that would be the typical sort of reiteration of how things happen.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I've read to you the draft principle, and if you can take a look at those 9 principles on the left, Management Principles for FSC Fisheries, you'll agree with me that that draft principle number 3 didn't make it into one of the 9 principles.
I'm looking at on the left side document number 3, Albert. And it didn't make it into the right-hand document? Or
the left-hand. So the right-hand document, draft principle, didn't make it into the management principles. The right didn't make it into the left.
Oh, the number 3 under potential. Where are you looking on the right-hand document?
Sorry, the right-hand document, you'll see the heading, Draft Principle number 3,
yes.
Processes and decisions regarding FSC access should incorporate some flexibility within a generally consistent approach. That principle didn't make it into Management Principles for FSC Fisheries, one of the 9.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lunn, if we can then, on that left side document, the management principles for FSC fisheries, then go to page 3. Now, at the top of page 3, there is a heading called NTC Fishing Area Considerations. Mr. Huber, NTC, would that be Nachalnuth?
That would be, yes.
Thank you. And I'm just going to read some of the solid bullets here and then ask you my question. So the first solid bullet, Aboriginal fishing should occur within areas that were traditionally used by First Nation, round brackets, principle 4. And then we drop down to the next solid bullet. Exceptions to fishing in areas traditionally used by First Nations may be considered in rare cases where there are compelling management reasons to relocate harvesting activities. And then we drop down to the next solid bullet, not the inset ones. Natural fluctuations in abundance or migratory patterns of target species or stock will not normally be considered a rationale for NTC harvesting opportunities outside their fishing area, round brackets, principle number 6. So would you agree with me, given that this is attached to the document management principles, like it's page 3 of this document, what this is an application of those principles to a specific situation, a Nachalnuth situation?
Yes.
And do you happen to know whether this is an example, a hypothetical example, or whether this is an actual example, like an actual application, a real-life application?
I don't know.
Okay. And would you agree with me, given what I've read to you, that First Nations seeking to fish out of their management areas, that would be very, based on this application, that would be difficult to get approval by DFO. Those would be rare circumstances.
It's definitely an issue. I mean, we have made those accommodations at times, but there's sensitivities both ways. Of course, for the area where you want to access the fish, there's often the First Nations in those areas are reluctant to agree. And then there's been times when department's gone ahead and it's created conflict with.
Okay, but in times when other First Nations have agreed, the host nations have agreed.
Yes, we have
that
done
would still be a rare circumstance where DFO would allow this based on this application of those 9 principles.
Well, it can happen. I mean, in the policy, it provides for that, and it has happened, but it's not frequent. Put it that way.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lunn, if I can take down both those, you can take down both those documents now. Oh, sorry, I would like them marked as the next exhibits, please.
59 has already been marked as 1224.
Thank you.
43, you wish that would be marked?
Yes, please.
Be 1,228.
And Mr. Lunn, could you please pull up HealthSec document number 58? Mr. Huber, this is a document entitled DFO Guidelines for Responding to Requests by Aboriginal Organizations to Fish for FSC outside of their management areas. Just cut that short. And if you take a look at, if we can scroll down to the bottom of the document, there's an electronic marker on this, and it indicates to me that it looks like it came from one of your files. So are you familiar with, sorry, if we can go back to the whole document.
It did come off of one of my directories, yes.
And can you read
Should
that?
Should I deny that?
No, but I'm just asking. Okay, if we can go to the second page, please. Under policy guideline, you've already told me that you don't often deal with requests from First Nations to fish out of the management area. And here I just want to establish under policy guidance, the 4th empty bullet is what I would consider to be called the current, what I believe is the current accounting rule. And the actual rule itself is that last sentence of that 4th empty bullet, which is the other Aboriginal group must count the harvest against the allocation provided under the communal license issued to it.
Yes.
Okay, so does this refresh your memory and establish that this is the current accounting rule?
That was the rule for a long time. The earlier discussion we had was, I wasn't clear on it, but this rule we've used for, for a long time, yes.
Okay, and this rule is narrower than, for example,
It
the
is.
one in the operational guideline, correct?
It is.
Okay. And again, this is not a rule that's given to First Nations in advance of them negotiating their FSC or their AFS agreements.
No, we discussed this situation. We have, from the Fraser even, First Nations members travel to the Skeena to get fish, and when they go to the Skeena to get their fish, they would come out of wherever the group's allocation that they went and accessed the fish from.
Right, but my question to you is, prior to negotiating their AFS agreements, this isn't information that's provided to First Nations.
That particular rule, yes.
And do you know if that's true right up the coast?
Well, I can't say for all our staff, but certainly in the interior where I work,
I got one more document. Mr. Lang, could you please pull out Healthsig's Comprehensive Fisheries Agreement? It's Healthsig number 13, Exhibit 305. Yeah, just right. Okay, and could you please go to page 19? Mr. Huber, this is Healthsig's AFS agreement. And on page 19 is the schedule for the FSC schedule, or sorry, it's an appendix to the FSC schedule, and it provides that Healthsig can have 20,000 pieces of sockeye. Did you see that, sir?
yes.
Thank you. Now, my question for you pertains to an event which happened to my client in 2010. Last fishing season in 2010, so that was the year when there was that very abundant sockeye run, 34 million sockeye. Healthsig, late summer, because all the fish had run past earlier in the season, because that's when they passed Bella Bella, had then asked to fish out of their management area down south in the Georgia Strait because there were all these fish. And the nation that they spoke to agreed to it. And the question became, would DFO permit it to occur? And DFO said no. And DFO said no for a number of reasons. I'm going to ask you to assume I'm right about why DFO said no, because I'll come into other evidence. One of the reasons was that they were told that Healthsig, or the Northern First Nations, did not have an allocation for Fraser River sockeye salmon. So based on your experience with these agreements and negotiating these agreements and dealing with these agreements, this allocation for 20,000 pieces of sockeye, does that include Fraser River sockeye?
Well, I'm not familiar with the stocks that the First Nations harvest in that area. I'm assuming, if what you just told me, that it doesn't.
Well, this is what it says in their AFS agreement.
Right.
And
it's-
we can agree Fraser River sockeye salmon is sockeye, right?
There's an allocation in a fishing area, and if they access that 20,000 within the area that's issued in the license in the agreement, and that happen to be Fraser sockeye in there, they could harvest them.
Thank you. I just want to come back to, as my last question, the comments you made about the AFS, the secret mandates. You said that you would defend it to the, if I get this right, defend it strenuously, not disclosing that information in negotiating AFS agreements. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And as I understood your rationale for that, your rationale was, well, both sides of the table come to the table with secrets, and it's the only way we can manage fisheries.
I don't know if I like to characterize it as secrets. You come to the table to negotiate an agreement, and you understand obviously in a negotiation, each of the parties going to have, I like to think them as chips to negotiate with, and flexibility.
And is it possible that First Nations don't have that same view, in that they've got their chips on the table and they prefer to have everybody's chips on the table so that you can have a negotiation based on trust with all the information on the table.
That's not my experience, and I've dealt with First Nations all over, including the Nisga'a. They like to negotiate, and I don't see a negotiation where everybody lays their chips on the table. I haven't had that experience as being a good way to negotiate.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. Oh, sorry, was there a... yes, could I please mark that last document? Did I mark it?
That was tab 58.
Just pull up document.
But just to add to that
305.
is that just forces you to be positional right off the bat, and it forces the parties to then elevate it to another level if there's not agreement. So, you know, and I look to engage in a process where you can reach agreements, you know, at the level, at the working level.
Okay. Thank you. And HealthSec 58, could we have that marked as an exhibit as well?
The 1,229.
And what is tab 13 in the description?
That's exhibit 305.
Thank you. So, Mr. Commissioner, Ms. Gertner has some re-examination, and Commission Council will take the final 10 minutes in re-examination. And that should round out today.
Mr. Commissioner, we're not going to be finished in the 20 minutes in terms of re-examination. I have more than 10 minutes in terms of documents, so I will try to do what I can, but I think I'm going to have to ask some follow-up questions in writing if that's permissible for the redirect. Mr. Jones, Mr. Tyzik for the province 2 days ago asked you questions regarding the mandate of the First Nations Fisheries Council, and in your answers you spoke about the regional meetings and the appointments that FNFC has received from those. Can you advise the Commissioner about the relationship between the FNFC and the Leadership Council, in particular the UBCIC and the Summit, and also the AFN, because there's also, as I understand it, relationships that provide mandates that way also?
Yes, I think I mentioned that initially the First Nation Council members were appointed by the Leadership Council, and then once there was a mandate to basically to establish geographic representation, the council was established, and so we give regular reports back to the members of the Leadership Council, whether that's the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, the First Nations Summit, and the BCAFN, and we're currently working on some MOUs that will kind of clarify kind of how we will work together, you know, on a range of issues, you know, from operational issues to political issues.
And is it my understanding that that draft accord is presently being discussed and you anticipate completing it in the near future?
Yes, that's one of our priority items for this this year.
And would you be happy to provide that to the Commission once it's completed?
Of course.
And similarly, at paragraph 331 of the PPR related to this matter, it suggests that the commitment to action is actually not signed. Is that correct, or has the commitment to action been signed? And I can take you to Exhibit 1191 if that might be helpful.
Yes, it was signed. I was there when it was signed in June last year.
Thank you. All right, and it's signed both by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, in particular Paul Sprout, and by members of the First Nations.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, and then if I could have Canada's documents, tab 41 and tab 9. This first document, tab 41, is the draft work plan for the Food, Social, and Ceremonial Fisheries Working Group. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Could I have that marked as the next exhibit?
1,230.
And could I have tab 9 then? And is that the work plan for the co-management group?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Could I have then now exhibit 945, please? Which, these are marked. Could I have this one marked also? Thank you.
Yes, that'd be marked as 1,231. That's tab 9.
Thank you.
Exhibit 945.
Then exhibit 945, which is tab 59 in the First Nations Coalition's document, Commissioner, if you want to go to the actual document again. But if you go then, if you can scroll down, I'm sorry, that document is 945A is what I need, sorry. And there isn't page numbers in that, and you're going to have to find the page for Fraser River Aboriginal Fisheries Secretariat. You'll see it at the bottom.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Mr. Todd, that document reflects work that Department of Fisheries and Ocean has done to compile references to meetings that apparently were had with the FRAS around WSP implementation. I want to take you to the Visions Workshop of 2010 and October 13th and 14th. You were at that meeting?
I missed the first day. I was at the second day.
To your knowledge, was the WSP talked about at that workshop?
Not to my knowledge. It certainly, my recollection, was not on the agenda. Somebody during some conversation may have said something that had WSP in a sentence, but as a topic, Visions topic, to my knowledge, it wasn't on the agenda.
So, and to your knowledge, was it in any way substantively addressed at that Visions conference?
Not to my knowledge.
Thank you. Mr. Huber, your council asked you a number of questions regarding Canada's consultation and best practices and the work of the Consultation Secretariat. We're done with that exhibit, if that's okay. And if I need to, I can take you to Exhibit 596. But more importantly, I think it's important that we understand here, and that the Commissioner gets a sense of it, who does the strength of claim analysis on behalf of the department when assessing potential impacts to First Nations rights?
It wouldn't be the staff in the areas, and treating Aboriginal policy in our unit there has looked at that issue.
Who's responsible for requesting that these be done?
I don't know on that.
So you don't request that they be
No.
done? And why is that you're not requesting strength of claim analysis if you're talking about potential implications to FSC allocations on the Fraser River sockeye?
It just, on the Fraser and what I've been doing, it just hasn't been an issue. The allocations that we have on the Fraser, the First Nations haven't been meeting those allocations, so we haven't been pressured. I mean, one of the reasons they haven't met the allocations, the stocks have been in not very good shape for some time.
So when you make decisions about openings and closings and the potential for those impacts to First Nations rights, you don't assess strength of claim, is that correct?
Well, on the Fraser, the groups I have dealt with, I just assume they have a strong strength of claim. It's obvious to me they do.
Thank you. Could I then have First Nations Coalition documents 89 to 94? And Ms. Huber, I just need you to identify some of these so I can get them marked, and then I've got a couple questions. Can you identify document 89 as a document the Department of Fisheries and Oceans created as it relates to First Nations access to FSC?
I've seen so many of these, so I'm sure. Yeah, I would have seen this, yes.
I have this marked as the next exhibit.
Exhibit 1232.
And can I take you to issue 3, priority of access, in this document? For some reason I don't have. There. And if you go to the next page, you'll see that a option B was to conduct a regional review of the allocations to identify situations where there are widespread low allocations. Did that happen? Did this regional review of the allocations of FSC occur?
I think it did, but I wasn't involved in that myself.
And yet that would be something that would be directly part of your discussions with First Nations on the Fraser.
Well, we haven't focused, my focus has been on building this structure, not on arguing over numbers. In fact, I've tended to stay away from that argument because we're trying to build the foundation of where we can have those, so we can have those discussions.
Could I have this marked as the next exhibit?
1233.
This is tab 89. I think we've already marked this.
Are you still
Okay.
on tab 89?
I was.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. That is 1232.
All right, let's go to 90. Is this an example of how the department puts their decision, access decision package together?
Oh, are you asking me if that's an example?
Yes. Just an example of the approach the department uses when assessing FSC?
That we prepared a template for that. This would be the
Could I have that marked
template.
as the next exhibit?
1233.
Could I take you to Exhibit 91? Are you familiar with this document?
Yes, yeah.
Could I ask you to explain principle number 10? FSC access decisions will take into consideration operational factors such as First Nations capacity and governance, in particular resource management, cooperation, and participation. I must say when I looked at that, it somehow suggested that if First Nations cooperated, that would be considered in their FSC allocations. Is that what you were intending?
Sorry, Mr. Commissioner, sorry. I'm wondering why we're getting into new areas. I understood that Ms. Gartner was going to put in some documents for the record, but now we're getting into areas that aren't proper redirect in my view.
Well, you raised in your examination the FSC and the consultative obligation, so I'm responding to questions you've raised in your direct.
Just perhaps, Mr. Commissioner, I have a chance to raise a couple questions in response after Ms. Gartner's done.
Maybe, did you want me to respond to that?
Yes, please, Ms. McCord.
I didn't make that clause, and I did look through, it's been some time since I looked through it, but within the last year I had to look through that. And there's a number of things I would change. That's one of them.
Could I have that marked as the next exhibit?
1,234.
And then finally, if we go to document 94. Mr. Huber, this is a document I believe that the department has created. If you look at the bottom of it, it's in April 2010. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this is a draft of the methods for sharing FSC sockeye when there is the FSC total allowable catch is less than the combined FSC needs. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with this document?
Well, I would need to read through it to refresh my memory.
But you can confirm this is a document the department has created?
Yes.
And you have seen it? Could I have this marked as the next exhibit?
1,235.
Are you aware of whether or not that's been ground truthed with First Nations?
No.
It has not, or you're not aware?
I'm not aware. Since these were developed, that has not been a focus of my attention.
All right, thank you, Mr. Huber. My next question is for you, Mr. Jones. My understanding is that you gave evidence earlier about the FNFC proposal repick fee, and in particular the recommendation that it be renewed and a particular amount of that renewal of $425 million. Is the FNFC presently developing a document which details why that's your recommendation and why it's $425 million?
Yes, we are, and we have had also discussions with the Department of Fisheries and Ocean representatives through the Economic Access Work Group.
And would you be happy to provide that document to the Commission upon its completion?
Yes, we would.
All right. I have just 5 documents. I intend to just have them marked in the next as quickly as I possibly can. Mr. Commissioner, these documents are documents related to aquaculture. They are documents of the FNFC. There's not presently any intention to call a member of the FNFC during that period, so I have to get Mr. Jones to confirm them. So if I could take you to, first of all, FNFC document 24. Mr. Jones, can you do you recognize that document?
Yes, I do.
It's a letter from FNFC to the minister.
Yes.
You have that marked as the next exhibit.
Exhibit 1,236.
I could take you to FNFC document 26. Mr. Jones, do you recognize that document?
Yes, I do.
It's a letter from FNFC to David McCallum.
Yes.
I have that marked as the next exhibit.
1,237.
Go to document number 25. This is a letter from FNF's, the First Nations Leadership Council, to Honorable Gail Shea, in which the FNFC is CC. Do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
Could I have that marked as the next exhibit?
1,238.
Could I go to document number 22? This is a summary report of the aquaculture community meetings that the FNFC completed. Do you recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
Could I have this marked as the next exhibit?
1,239.
Can I take you to document number 20? This is a report of the FNFC has done on the proposed federal aquaculture regulations. Do you recognize that document?
Yes, I do.
Could I have that marked as the next exhibit?
1,240.
I go to document number 21. This is a report done by the FNFC regarding the development of the integrated management on aquaculture plans. Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
I have that marked as the next exhibit.
1,241.
Final document is FNFC document number 82. Oh, sorry, two more documents, and thank you, Mr. Jones. Those are the ends for you. Mr. Huber, these are the next two documents are for you. Mr. Huber, this appears to be a previous draft of the document that we now have as an Exhibit 290. Do you recognize this document? I believe that you mentioned that you drafted this.
Yes.
You
I
have that
drafted so many different documents. It's
May I have that marked as a next exhibit?
1,242.
I was going to ask you some questions, but I'll have to move on that. And finally, may I have First Nations document 93? Mr. Huber, is this an example of a negotiation mandate that you're provided as it relates to the negotiations of FSC?
yes.
And you'll confirm for me that there seems to be a set amount of money and a set amount of FSC allocations in this. There isn't a range. Is that correct?
That's right.
Those are my... may I have that marked as the next exhibit?
1,243.
I mean, you'll note it's not set yet. It's requested.
But your recommendations, your mandate for recommendations is a solid number of funding and a solid number for allocation. You're not given a range in there, are you?
No, but when I went to negotiate, I may not negotiate to that level. I would just make sure that I had that approved ahead of time.
All right. Gosh knows, I hope I got all my documents in. Thank you so much for your patience on all of that.
Mr. Commissioner, if I could ask a couple of questions and redirect. Perhaps on that last document, if we can have that one back up, this is negotiation mandate. If we can just go down to the footer at the bottom. Mr. Huber, is this a document that, I'm just going to take a look, and it says it appears to have come from your database.
Yeah.
Now this document, if we can go back up, is this a document that has been provided to you by the Department of Fisheries, or is this something that you put together?
I put that together.
Okay, so this isn't what you would call a formal DFO mandate that's provided to you?
No.
Oh, okay. So this is something that you've prepared as a bit of a summary of information that you have from other sources?
Whenever I wanted something, I would go about justifying it.
Okay, thank you. The second question I have relates to a question Ms. Gartner asked you about strength of claim assessments. In your experience in the area that you work in, engaging with First Nations on FSC allocation questions, is it your experience that the First Nations you're dealing with have approached you and requested that DFO demonstrate its strength of claim analysis of that First Nation's strength of claim or other First Nation strength of claim? Is that something they typically request that you present?
I haven't had that experience, no.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Mr. Commissioner, I see we're at 4 o'clock. Commission Council did have a couple of questions which we were considering in re-examination. Did you want to carry on for a minute or two, or should we just, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Jennifer Shanagan for the Commission, and just a few points of clarification, and I will be very quick with this. Mr. Jones, you were speaking about pig fee, and I understand you described it as the first step taken to address the longstanding issues of access to the commercial fishery. And just that phrasing of it, calling it the first step, Mr. Huber, I was wondering if you wanted to clarify about the allocation transfer program and whether or not that also provided commercial access to First Nations to the fishery.
It was the ATP, it was part of the AFS program.
And that would have preceded the pig fee program.
That's right, and the fish from the allocation transfer program, well, and the licensing, would have been, it was transferred to the community. It was a communal arrangement.
Okay. Sorry, Mr. Jones, you want to
Maybe
speak
the
to that?
point I'd make is that allocation transfer program, was at the range of $5 million a year, since about '94. And I think the difference with PICFI was it was $115 million over 5 years. So it was a significant increase, but it didn't reach kind of the point where we would say that it was an adequate amount.
Thank you. Although I understand not all of that PIC fee money was directed towards the acquisition of commercial access. Is that right?
No, it's $175 million over 5 years, and $115 million was for access or gear, and I think about 10% of the $115 million was gear, and the rest for access.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, there is more information on the ATP program in the PPR pages 70 and following. And another point of clarification, Mr. Jones, you were asked as well about your understanding of what percentage of the fishery was caught by First Nations. And I believe we have some information on that in the Policy and Practice Report as well at page 45.
Page 45? Or
Page 45.
Thank you.
And Mr. Huber, you responded, I understand, by saying that FSC numbers were generally quite stable, but the percentage might fluctuate depending on the amount of returns. And does this table here on the screen exemplify that shift in percentages that you were talking about?
That's correct. Yeah, that looks like that's what that illustrates.
And does it? Sorry,
in
does
low
it?
abundance years, there's the high percentage of First Nations catch.
Okay. And moving on to a question that came about in discussions about our place at the table. And there was discussion of recommendation number 3, which I understand says that First Nations themselves must address the issue of allocations. Mr. Huber, I wonder, is the issue of FSC allocation something that has come up in the forum process that you described earlier?
Yes, I missed the first part of your question there.
Just tying that into the recommendation from our place at the table that says that First Nations themselves must address the issue of allocations. I was wondering if that's something that's being addressed under
Yeah,
the
it's a
forum
big issue
process.
at the table. In these years of low abundance, and when we focused right at the beginning of the forum process in 2008, as there wasn't enough fish to meet, and we knew that, or didn't expect there to be, to meet First Nations needs on the Fraser and the marine approach areas, those that harvested the main harvesters. So we were looking for them to come together and discuss how they would share what was available and come up with a plan. We would like to see that, in particular in years where there's low abundance, that the groups themselves come together and figure out how to share what's available.
So that would be a year like 2009 where, for example, all of the fishery was to go to FSC purposes. Is that right?
That's right, and quite frequently the early stewards, the first run it's basically a First Nations only fishery.
And have agreements been reached through that process of sharing the FSC allocation through the forum program?
No, we did once in 1996 for the early stewards. Since we had a formula, since then we haven't been able to achieve that.
Sorry, Mr. Todd, I saw you indicating a desire to answer.
Just for clarity, in 2009, to my knowledge, there wasn't really an FSC fishery. So there was not any kind of question of sharing. 2009 is when the run failed, and virtually all fish that returned were destined for the spawning grounds. There were some individual efforts at obtaining some FSC fish. Chief Salteri can speak to that, but they were not coordinated in any way, and the department was actually out enforcing no fishing bans.
I understand that's an issue that may come up in following days as well. And my last question is to you, Chief Terry. You've been discussing today the Intertribal Treaty Organization. I understand that that's a fairly new organization that you're heading up. I just wonder, with the development of organization at nation levels, is that something that's ready now to engage with DFO in a process of co-management? Are those nation structures set up yet?
Yes, they are. We are set up, and the structure is established. The operational capacity, though, is not there. That's the difficulty right now. but we do have a constitution and bylaws under the Intertribal Treaty Organization that pretty well outlines how we operate.
And would all the relevant bands that would be governed under this ITO model that you have described, have they all signed on to the ITO right now?
We have established a document to which they could apply their mark or so on. And what the process is that each of the nations would establish their representative along with an alternate. And if they sign on, and 5 have indicated that they have, then it is internally their responsibility to get the acquiescence of the or concurrence of their own members to make it unanimous, as one might say. But we are working towards that. I indicated the other day that it is not an easy task, and it is really the colonial experience, if you will, is something that we need to sort of overcome in many instances, and so we're working very hard at that.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Mr. Registrar, could you bring up Exhibit 295? I may not have the right document. Is there a page 5 to that document? No, I don't think that's it. Let me just check. I don't think that's the one I wanted. Try Exhibit... I wanted the document, Mr. Registrar, that had the spectrum in it. Was that on screen? Yes, thank you very much. My apologies, thank you. I just wanted to ask you, Mr. Huber, if I could, just for clarification for my purposes. In these columns, and I'm just looking first at under government management, it says DFO informs First Nations and stakeholders of decisions. And then in this next column under information exchange, DFO informs First Nations and stakeholders what management actions it tends to take, and so on. I don't have to read that to you. You can read it for yourself. And there's another reference to the stakeholders under advisory. And then under the partnership shared management, there's a reference to stakeholders. And then the final column under devolution, it says government delegates the authority for resource management to First Nations and or stakeholders. I just wonder if you could clarify for me what it means by and or stakeholders in that column.
Well, first of all, this is, Commissioner, the document the First Nation Fisheries Council generated, I believe.
I realize that, but you've seen this document.
I have, yes.
And I just wonder what your understanding was of that. Perhaps.
Well, that would be, the delegation of authority. Maybe Russ would be.
What was your understanding of that? And then maybe I could ask him what his.
Well, my understanding of that delegation of authority would be that there's an agreement that and would be spelled out what decision-making authority the group has, whether it's a First Nation or it could be other stakeholders.
Mr. Jones, I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to think if I can think of any of that examples where there's been devolution and. I'd say, like, for just an example, the razor clam fishery that we're involved in co-managing, we basically do stock assessments, we collect catch information, we report back to DFO kind of monthly catches, but then meet at the end of the year and discuss a management plan. So that is kind of getting in more towards possible devolution, but I think there still is, the federal government still does play a role in, just checking and making sure things are going okay, that kind of thing. So I think there are some fisheries where that that could happen. I think particularly whether it's the First Nations or others who are basically collecting all the information about the fishery and essentially doing the management, doing the enforcement, you get closer to that, that devolution.
Well, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
It's not a question. I missed one document on the aquaculture. May I put it in? I know I'm really pressing my luck, but could I have document 23 on the First Nations coalition list?
I wondered about that. I think you skipped over that.
I did skip over that. I'm so sorry.
It's exhibit number 1244.
Thank you.
I take it, Mr. McGowan and Ms. Chan, that ends that.
Yes, Mr. Commissioner.
Well, I wanted to thank the panel members very much for your attendance here and for answering the questions of council and myself. And I want to thank you for your cooperation. We had to, unforeseeable circumstance required us to cancel yesterday, so I'm very grateful that you were able to make yourselves available today. Once again, I thank you very much for that. And I want to thank Ms. Chan and Mr. McGowan for preparing for this hearing and conducting the panel initially, and for all of the participants, council here today, and Mr. Eidsvik, who were asking questions. I thank you for that and for staying within your time constraints. And so I take it Ms. Chan or Mr. McGowan, I don't know who's going to tell me, we're off till Monday now at 10 a.m., is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, we'll adjourn now till Monday, 10 a.m., and we'll proceed on Monday with the next panel, which will carry on for those 2 days.
Right, thank you very much, and I know tomorrow's a holiday, so I wish you all a very pleasant and well-earned, restful weekend. Thank you very much.
Hearing is now adjourned until Monday at 10 a.m.